Hello there, you're watching the press preview, our first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. So it's time to see what's making the headlines. Tonight, we're expecting the Daily Mail's consultant editor, Andrew Pearse, any minute, having a few problems with his line at the moment. Oh, and there he is!
Door behind me.
There we are. He's there, he's there. You're on telly, Andrew, just to warn you. Also, the Daily Mirror's associate editor, Kevin Maguire. Good to see both of you. And I'm pleased to see
and you, Anna, I think Andrew
Should I close that door or not? Is that OK?
It's still lining
Andrew
up.
had turned off the power.
How about I'll go through the front pages, shall I? And I'm sure we'll get Andrew by the end of those. So, what's on the front pages of them? The Metro suggests the Chancellor hasn't taken account of inflation, lower living standards and higher tax burdens in his spring statement. Their headline, No Heat to Eat. The Telegraph quotes a critique of the statement from the Office for Budget Responsibility, which says the country faces the biggest fall in living standards on record. The Eye has a similar headline and a striking graph to go with it. Normally a staunch supporter of the Tories, the Express is highly critical, referencing forgotten millions, asking, what about us? The Guardian accuses the Chancellor of squeezing the poorest. And the Star is pretty blunt, calling it the up yours mini-budget. And so's the Mirror, thanks for nothing, the headline there. The Financial Times says Rishi Sunak has banked a £50 billion windfall he could have spent to allow him to cut taxes before the next general election. As the Mail puts it, it's now time to slash taxes even further in the face of a record squeeze on incomes. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code that you can see on screen during the programme, you can check out all those front pages of tomorrow's papers for yourself while you watch us. And so I'm joined by Andrew Pearse and Kevin Maguire. Good to see you both. Sorry we've had a few problems getting through to you there, Andrew, but nice to see that you can obviously hear us now. Let's dive straight in, shall we? All the headlines devoted to the spring statement today. None of them terribly kind to the Chancellor on the face of it, Andrew. I don't know what you think. Front page of the Telegraph's the one you picked out first. The biggest fall in living standards on record, they say, and that comes from the government's own financial watchdog.
Yeah, look, they won't be very happy in number 10 about these front pages. Our front page in the Mail isn't particularly positive either. The Express, which has been probably the most loyal paper of them all, is very critical. Look, my news, the fact is he moved further than we thought in some ways on national insurance because he's raised the threshold to £12,750. So that's going to be an extra £330 for people. That's very important. But that's going to be dwarfed by the rise in fuel bills. The 5p off fuel duty, well, he banged on about it's the biggest cut for 20 years or the first cut for 20 years. But it's pathetic because petrol prices went up at, I think, 9p in the last fortnight. So he's not done enough. And I think the FT has got it right. He's banked a lot of the money he could have spent today, announced today, and I think he's storing it up for October when we get the second rise in fuel, when the fuel ceiling is lifted for a second time, and we could really be in big trouble with our fuel bills. I suspect in the budget in November, he's going to throw a lot more money at it. But that's not much consolation to families who are struggling right now. So he's moved he moved further on the thresholds than I thought. But actually, my newspaper was campaigning for him to get rid of the national insurance rise altogether. And actually, he's made it quite a complicated spring statement, actually. If he just postponed the entire rise in national insurance, it would have been a lot easier for everybody.
Well, you mentioned the Financial Times there. And as you say, Kevin, he did have more money that he could have spent, didn't he? Because higher than expected growth meant better than expected tax receipts. So he has got tens of billions that he could have spent. But does it make sense to wait to the autumn? We're expecting energy prices to keep on rising. He's got to keep something back, hasn't he, to help people out then when that bites?
I know it makes no sense if you're a struggling family now and you're having to make terrible choices over heating and eating and your spending because you're being squeezed. You want the help now, not for a political game by a chancellor who wants to wait for his own calculation. So if he's being clever, he's only being clever in a very party political way, and he could well get a kicking for that from voters because they will suffer in the in the meantime, they're going to get all the pain. He hopes to have some political gain. I'm not sure he'll get it that way. Because he did have the money to give greater help. And I've never seen a set of newspaper front pages that have been so negative at a Conservative budget since they returned to power in 2010, because the Daily Telegraph, the Daily Tory Graph, it's been Boris Johnson's cheerleader. As Andrew said, the Daily Express has been the staunchest ally and supporter of the Conservatives in power, and even that is critical. So if you're the Chancellor, you think you're being clever, you look at those front pages tonight, you're not being clever at all. You've just managed to alienate everybody. Now, of course, the Mirror and the Guardian were always going to be more critical, but he hasn't got the Telegraph on his side, he hasn't got the Express on his side, he hasn't got Andrew's paper, the Mail, on his side. So all those messages are very, very negative for him.
Well, yes, and let's look at the Express. The forgotten millions say, what about us? I mean, is the real problem here that the lowest, the poorest amongst us, those on universal credit, because that's due to go up by around 3%. But we've heard today really high inflation figures for the last month, and then inflation looks like it's going to be more like 8%, isn't it, Andrew? Is that where the biggest miss is, in your view?
Well, I think so, and also pensioners. The pension rise is going to be nothing like the rate of inflation, which is heading for 7% already. Could be 8%, could be 9%. So, but people on benefits have got no upgrade at all here. The Chancellor went on about some complicated system to the tapering system of universal credit, which will help some. And of course, people won't be paying any tax or national insurance until they're earning £12,750. But if you are on benefits, you are going to be struggling a lot more. Now, the message of the clear message here, I think, from the Tory Chancellor is get a job. Not always so straightforward and easy for people, but there are 1 million vacancies in the system, and that clearly seems to be the underlying message. If you have a job, you'll be a lot better off, and we want to get you off benefits. So they're making it much less attractive to be on benefits, which I often would say that's the right way. You want to get people back into work, but some people are going to really, really struggle with these fuel bills. Food bills soaring in price. We know the problem with Ukraine, and the wheat that's coming out of Ukraine is massively increased in price. That's going to impact on food bills, and that's going to hurt people at the lowest end of the income scale. Some people on benefits who simply can't work, because not everybody can.
And while you come back at that, Kevin, let's look at your front page of your paper, The Mirror. Thanks for nothing is the headline there. And Andrew mentioned a few things there, talking about the pandemic, talking about the war in Ukraine. There have been unprecedented pressures on the Chancellor and the need for a huge amount of spending to bail us out of crises. But you just can't keep spending forever, can you?
Yeah, COVID last year, Ukraine this year, and next year a big boy with a stick who runs away. Look, Rishi Sunak's got to face up to his responsibilities and what's happening in the economy. He can't just keep blaming other people when, as you've just pointed out, the FT are recording he had a lot of money to spend, but he's decided not to go with it yet. He's going to let people suffer because he wants to play his political games later on. So yes, you can keep spending up to some extent, Anna. And as you know, we're finding money for the war in Ukraine. We found money for COVID, and he can find money for projects he wants now. Okay. So he will get deservedly a lot of stick over this. I think the Office for Budget Responsibility says he's returning about £1 in every 6 extra he's taken in tax over the last 2 years. He is a tax-raising chancellor. He keeps saying, "Oh, my aim is to be low tax." He's raised tax to record amounts. As the Telegraph points out, the tax burden is back to levels not seen since Clement Attlee was Prime Minister after the Second World War in the 19th age of rationing.
I'm cutting in because we've not got much time, and I just want to talk about the Daily Mail's front page, your paper, Andrew, now slashed taxes even further. So if the tax burden is high now, yes, there's obviously an awful lot of Tory MPs will want to see taxes cut, but what do you make of him announcing an income tax cut in 2024? I mean, that's a political move, isn't it?
It is, but what he's trying to show is that the Tory party are back on the road towards cutting taxes again, because they don't want to be outmanoeuvred by Labour beginning to say this is the Tories are the high tax party. That's a disastrous place for the Tories to be. They've been the party of low taxation since Mrs. Thatcher, Nigel Lawson. He's got that portrait of Nigel Lawson in his office in the Treasury. Nigel Lawson was the Chancellor who cut tax from 60p to 40p, the top rate of tax. So this is what he's trying to do, to say, yes, I am on your side. I am cutting your taxes, but he might cut it next year by a penny in the pound. It might be the year after. It's quite clever politics, because he's basically saying to Labour, will you vote down the increase? Vote down the cut.
I'm going to cut both of you off. I'm going to be rude to both of you, I'm afraid. At least I'm equal. We're going to take a break right now. Do stay with us, though. Coming up, the US pledges to pursue Russia for war crimes. But will it succeed? We're going to talk about that in a moment. You're watching the press preview. With me tonight, Andrew Pearse and Kevin Maguire. So welcome back to you two. Kevin, we're turning to The Guardian's second story on their front page. US pledges to pursue Russia for war crimes. This is Joe Biden touchdown in Brussels tonight.
Yeah, for a NATO summit, and Antony Blinken, the Secretary of State, the Foreign Secretary, effectively, of the US, is saying they will pursue the Russians, and so they should, as we watch the pounding of Ukrainian cities, particularly Mariupol. These are clear war crimes, but I wonder how they're going to pursue it, because the US itself doesn't recognise the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court in The Hague. It's never joined it, partly, I suspect, because the US has been a rogue state in some ways itself in the past. So I think it's quite right, the denunciations and condemnations of Putin and the forces of war crimes, but quite how a country like the US will be able to forward that prosecution, I'm not sure. Sure.
It is an interesting one, isn't it, Andrew? And in the meantime, what do you make of the fact that Joe Biden is arriving now in Europe? Do you think that he could have gone sooner? Are you surprised that he's arriving there now?
Well, I don't know. I suppose he's got to go at some point. There's a big NATO meeting, so good time to do it. I just don't think he's. I just have a heavy heart when I hear Biden speaking. I mean, Kevin's quite right. I mean, he's talking about international war crimes. Well, that's going to have to take place in The Hague, and I don't think the United States can be anything to do with it. Britain's already been involved in the process, as are the European Union countries. So I think Biden's just trying to get in on the action. But how can the United States do it? Because they don't recognise that court, and that's where he has to go. He's going to have to go to The Hague.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is a subject that we're going to revisit in just a moment. We're also going to talk about Ash Barty's surprise retirement. Haven't got time to talk about that now, but lots of us to get our teeth into at 11. Kevin and Andrew, for the moment, thanks very much indeed, and we'll see you again very shortly.